Welcome to What the Health with Josh and Kim, where we answer your most pressing questions about your health.
With 40 years of combined experience in health and wellness and fitness and nutrition, we hope to bring you valuable information you can use every day to be your healthiest self.
Hey guys, welcome to another What the Health episode. How are you, Josh?
Hey, I'm doing well. And you?
Yeah, I'm good.
So what are we going to talk about today? Sorry, Kim.
Oh, no, you're good. I had a lot of inquiries with summer coming up, and, the kids have been out of school, and I have a lot of parents calling me up saying, what the health? I think my kid is overweight, and I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that applies to not just our kids, but us, just kind of with this whole out of school thing and everybody just being a little more sedentary than normal. I think that's just going to affect everybody across the board. But yeah, let's focus on kids today.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. Let's focus on the kiddos.
Yeah. So I'll kick it off if you don't mind.
Sure.
So I'm going to say the biggest thing when it comes to kids, I actually coached Pop Warner tackle football from 3rd grade, and I followed that group all the way to 6th grade. So 4 years of working with them. And they make us take all these classes and make sure that the differences between training children versus adults. And, one of the things that they always ensure that you're doing is proper form because their bones are growing. So, any bone injuries that they get can affect them for the rest of their life. So, they're growing and there's certain things that they should and shouldn't do. Like, you can't start weight training too early, or you can stunt their growth, or, certain types of exercises. So, Kim, I know that you train all the time. What would you say is that age range where they can kind of start doing weights maybe?
Well, yeah, I do see a lot of kids in the gym, and whether they're in sports or their parents are sticking them in the gym, trying to get them active, and the good intentions, are there. However, like you've mentioned, their growth plates, the things between their bones, that the muscles are still pulling, the growth plates are still forming, the bone density is still coming. They're in the growing process, and there's a lot of space in the joints to allow for that growth. And that needs to be considered when bringing a child into the gym. And, boys and girls are slightly different because girls stop growing sooner than boys. But I would say if you're really doing lots of heavy plyometrics, jumping, bounding, jumping on top of a box, but more importantly, jumping off of a high box, and then heavy powerlifting, weight-bearing activity needs to be done under strict guidelines and supervision. And I'm more on the conservative side, and I know I'm going to get a little pushback from some coaches, but I'm a lot more conservative as to the age, and I just do not feel that anything under the age of 13 should be doing those kinds of activities, at least not in a training style or regimen.
Yeah, like super intense. I know I was about that age whenever I started, to like 7th grade when we started doing football and all those types of things, and getting into powerlifting. So that's about the age that I started.
Yeah, and the problem isn't necessarily that the coaches aren't monitoring or showing proper form, but they've got a lot of kids at one time that they're trying to supervise, and it just falls in the cracks. You just can't watch every single kid, every single set or rep. And that's the benefit of having a trainer or someone with a smaller group focusing on the kids. And which, I have a lot of people hire me to train their kiddos, and we do a lot of activities with the church and things. And like you're training, with the, is it football, Pop Warner and all of that.
Right.
And that's great because it's a smaller group and they're not lost in the, big setting of high school or even junior high sports program.
So I'm actually glad that you brought up, the recommended exercises like plyometrics, so cardiovascular exercises. I think that those are extremely important. However, some things to keep in mind kids have higher heart rates. because they're
Yes.
smaller, and then they can have, you know, lower blood pressures. They're smaller again, and then
Right.
they're more sensitive to oxygen levels. So because again they're still small, and that also helps with like regulating temperature, so they can overheat really easily, you know.
Yes.
So those are all things that you need to be aware of whenever you're exercising outside or even inside. And then proper hydration levels, they're going to be a lot more sensitive to that than an average adult. So those are really the main ones that I keep in mind whenever I'm actually training with my kids. Not my kids, but you know, kids.
Well, they're all our kids. I
Yeah.
claim them. They're my kids. But
Yeah.
you're 100% right. You've got to have lots of breaks built into the
Yes.
routine, and it's got to also be conducive to the environment. So are you training outside? Is it inside? Are they properly hydrated? Do they, have enough rest and recovery in between? They're just not, the load cannot be as intense as an adult can handle. So
Mhm.
it just is really kind of depends upon their lifestyle, their body composition, the training environment, and what they're used to doing. And I think that kind of leads us into maybe determining whether or not the child is actually an active child or a sedentary child. That's really predominantly where parents get a little bit concerned, I think. And everybody's different, and it's a personality. There's people who are a lot more just naturally active people, and then there's others who enjoy more sedentary activities like reading or art or even video games, I guess, and those kinds of things. So I think let's maybe talk a little bit about being the sedentary child and some activities that you can do to motivate those children and get them moving a little bit more. So what are your
Yeah.
thoughts there, Josh?
So one thing in terms of, you know, going from sedentary or, you know, no exercise to suddenly wanting to start exercising. Now, this is true for adults also, but I would say especially so in children, is those quick inflammation injuries like shin splints and, you
Yeah.
know, Achilles tendonitis and those types of things. And those will get you real quick, you know, and you're like, well, I didn't even do anything. All I did was like run for a little bit. And that's all
Right.
it takes is those high intensity, high impact exercises. Even like jumping jacks can cause all of that shin splint pain, you know, when you go from no activity to sudden activity. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. You know, if your kids are complaining that, hey, we only exercise maybe once or twice this week, but you know, they're having those things, you know, those are definitely things that you need to treat with the RICE method: rest, ice, compression, and elevation.
Yeah, and I think too, you need to take into consideration what you're doing and where you're doing it. So proper footwear, that's something that every client of mine, whether they're an adult or a child, we discuss on their first session. They bring all their shoes and I evaluate their shoes. That can make or break a training routine really quickly. And then also duration. If you're taking a child and you're trying to get them more motivated, the last thing you want to do is get, like you said, a shin splint or
Exactly.
one of those nagging, just painful, it kind of just aches all the time. It's going to really squash their desire to want to be
Yeah.
outside or do anything physical. I tend to lean more towards play. I lean more towards play for my adults too, who
Yeah.
aren't really wanting to do it. But something like ride your bicycle. I had a client, you know, he's been a client for a long time and a super great little kid. I just love this kid. He's got the greatest personality and he is just a really good kid. He's a great student. He's just not, he's in some sports during the school year, but they're just not really enough. And just being proactive, his parents wanted to have him train with me. He thought that looked fun because I train out of my house. So he lives down the street and he sees me outside with clients and he said, I would do that. That looks fun. So that is huge to me. If it's something, we play frisbee, we play football, we ride the bike, there's different games and obstacle courses and little routine things that we do and incentives all the time. If he and I do this with all my kids. If he does so much or so whatever, we have a little contest going on. He can win a little bubbly mineral water thing that he likes or something like that, and
Yeah.
just finding the thing that gets your kid excited and really wanting to continue. So it's just making it fun and enticing them to get outside. So if they're hurting all the time, I think that's huge, Josh, to really evaluate what are they running on, and what games are you playing? Are they just doing too much too soon?
Right.
So yeah. And you were an athlete as a child. So let's talk a little bit about the other side, the flip side of that coin. And we've gone from sedentary kid to just spectacular youth athlete.
Yeah. So, me as a child, I would spend all my hours outside. You finish your homework and then you just go outside and, dig holes or do whatever you want to do outside.
Yeah.
It's definitely a
Go
different
dig a
time.
hole, Josh.
I know. And that's what I would do. I would just, see what's under there.
Yeah. I
So,
love it.
yeah. Or you get the water hose and you just kind of run it into the ground and it digs its own hole and then bugs come out when you pull it out.
I went up. I'm more of a, let's hop over that fence or climb that tree or
yeah.
that's
Well,
funny. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, most of what I remember, I'd never try to go walk places. I try to just stay in our yard and probably make a mess there. But, just kind of getting dirty, that builds your immune system. And, honestly, the ones who are athletic, they don't need the motivation. But I will tell you, those are the ones that are probably going to be more the ones that struggle with concentrating, is that they're not getting that exercise outlet that they need. Yeah. I know that was something that I struggled with and still do to this day. Like if I'm not exercising and doing all those types of things, then you're really restless.
And it affects your sleep too.
Definitely. Yeah.
I know when I just get in a rut or I get busy with other things and that exercise is neglected, I don't burn off that excess energy, and I'm still eating well. So that's my food's giving me energy. And we don't have that outlet to burn it off. And those athlete kids, I know that that's something that not just the kids themselves, but the parents too struggle with having an off season. And for my athletes, that's something that I'm forced them to do. I get a lot of off season inquiries about training the athletes. And I say, you know what, you don't need to fill your Christmas break with training sessions with me. They need to rest their body.
Yeah.
And it drives them nuts. So keep talking about that. I love that you brought that up.
No, that's great. And I mean, I'm glad that you brought up recovery. I think that's equally important. If there was advice that I could give myself in high school, is that recovery is equally, if not more important than the actual workouts that you do,
Yeah.
When I was in high school, I was working out, 3 times a day, 6 to 7 days a week, and that's a lot. And that's why nobody has their high school figure anymore, just because they're not doing as much.
Well, and you can recover so much quicker and more fully when you're young. You've got that young body, and it just recovers because kids are so resilient. It goes unnoticed to the point that it becomes a serious injury, overtraining injury. It comes chronic fatigue, and their performance suffers. And you see this amazing, highly potentialed athlete just decline rapidly and get sick, and they just start scrambling for what's happening. And it's from just overtraining, never taking a break, not cross training. So you're a young athlete. Did you do multiple sports, or are you a single sport athlete?
Oh, no, I definitely did a lot of different things. So primarily like basketball, football, those types of things. So
all the ball sports.
And then, they would make us run during off season, so we can stay in shape. So
I think having multiple sports, it's a double-edged sword in a way, because it does cross train you. It allows your body to work in different aspects in different ways, which is huge. I think a single sport athlete, like for instance, just a competitive swimmer, is going to have a lot more issues if they're not cross training in the gym and doing some other things, especially gravity-based things for swimmers. But, the problem then on the other side of that, again, is multiple sports means prolonged seasons, and you run the risk of overtraining a lot quicker. So you need to find that little happy sweet spot, the balance between not doing enough and doing too much, and resting enough, and allowing your kid to be sedentary. Being still isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just, are you moving more than you're sitting? I think is a good gauge for any age.
Yeah. Now, I would say out of all the things that we said today, I think it's extremely important to, listen to your kids.
Yeah.
When I grew up, whatever injuries you had, you just kind of sucked it up,
Rub
and
some dirt on it.
that's it, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, but I know too many people who've done that, and they ruined their joints, and now in
Yeah.
adult life they're just ruined for it, or
They
they've
are.
broken things, dislocated things, or had to have surgery from things that have carried on for years since they were children themselves. And it's definitely something that I see very early on, and their parents want them to play through certain injuries, and there are certain injuries that you shouldn't play through. So, I mean, if it's like a sprained ankle, yes, you're going to rice it and those types of things. Not actual rice, but the rice method we were talking
Yeah.
about earlier. Yeah, we do that too, but
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
another thing.
That's a great heating pad. Put
It
rice
is.
in a
It
sock.
really
Yeah.
is.
That's a good
Yes.
little tip.
So yeah, I mean, if there's anything, that I would say that's the most important thing. That should be your gauge as to how much your children can be exercising. We obviously want them moving as much as possible, just because it's so good for them in general. One, for their mind, they can focus, but then also, to keep their bodies moving.
Well, and I think too, they're looking to you as well. You're a living example. And so if you have good balance, they're going to follow your footsteps. And if you don't, they're going to look to that as well. And I think at the end of the day, your child, do they tend to be super, super active, or do they tend to be more sedentary? And so when they are voicing these complaints or aches and pains, whether your kid is trying to be have an excuse to get out of exercise or going outside and playing, or if they really, maybe you need to just step back and listen to that athlete that is constantly going and say, okay, maybe we need to talk to another professional and have some kind of a physical evaluation to make sure that we're hitting all our bases. And that's something that I like to do. I like to talk with the parent and the child individually as well as together. So a lot of times you're just not going to get all the information because you're too close, to the kid. They're different with other people, and that's okay. It's perfectly normal. But once you have that information and that evaluation, moving forward, making the best decisions. No one wants, a child to hurt or be overweight or anything like that. But I think to just not allowing any recovery time or downtime. If they're not excited about their sport anymore, then y'all need to reevaluate what's happening and what's going on. And it could possibly just be some overtraining. I do have some questions. If they're not sleeping and stuff, that's one thing. That's definitely a sign of overtraining. If they're gaining weight or losing weight, that's a sign of overtraining. But what are some recovery things? If they just hurt all the time, if they're just like, I just ache, my muscles hurt, I'm tired and fatigued, and I just ache all the time from soreness. Josh, you're kind of the expert in the contraindications and the age range and everything for massage and those kinds
Yeah.
of recovery tools. What's in the toolbox and age ranges that you can share?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you for asking. So I'm going to say the absolute most important thing, and I mean, I see this in adults especially, is stretching. And I think so many people take stretching for granted, and everybody wonders, man, I used to be able to do the splits, or I used to be able to touch my toes, and then, you just never stretch again. And then you're an adult and you're like, oh, can't reach my toes anymore. so,
Yeah.
yeah, we need to really emphasize stretching. And honestly, that's going to keep a child's body balanced until they can get massages. Massages are going to be whenever they're having super tight muscles, or inflammation from certain activities, overuse obviously, or those types of things. Now, we generally don't take any clients less than 13 with their parent there at in the massage room, at least for the first time, so that they can the child is comfortable, until they're not a minor anymore. And then, and then we're good to go from there. I always make sure that the parent or a guardian or whatever is in the room, with me while I'm practicing, or with a therapist that we have. So, after they've seen it a few times, then they have the option, but they still have to be there. on the premises,
Right.
So that's very important to us. We always prioritize, your kids' health and all of that type of stuff. But if y'all have any other questions specifically, you can definitely call the spa. We'll get you all the information that you want, and any specific injuries or those types of things, we can definitely help with that.
Yeah, for sure. And I do recommend, at least to my teenage, pretty much 15 and older females, athletes, that they get massage as regularly as they can if they're in season. After, when they're out of season, it's a little bit different, but in season, if they can do that, that really speeds up recovery. And then compression stockings, that's something that we did in triathlon and traveling. If they can get some kind of compression tights or stockings, which I have a lot of recommendations about that, if you want to contact us there, if you're interested in doing compression, especially if you travel anywhere, and you're in season, meaning that, the sport that is competing in the moment, then traveling with compression is a huge benefit to recovery before and then also after the event. So whether it's, running, track, or any kind of ball sport or what have you. So
so the clients that we tend to see the most, actually, since you kind of mentioned it, are track or any type of running, and then also gymnastics. Those are the ones that we end up seeing the most. Obviously they have like overuse and sprinting injuries. Those are the ones that are notorious for having those types of injuries.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that pretty well wraps everything up, unless you have something to add.
Well, that's everything. So I guess that means it's time for our interesting
and possibly disgusting
fact about the human body.
So this one's about kids. It says kids actually tend to grow a bit faster in the spring than during other times of the year. I had no idea.
Yeah, that is so crazy.
I guess that makes sense. A lot of things grow in the spring. I mean, that's a new growth and in plants and everything else too. So why not kids? So it says a major growth spurt happens at the time of puberty, usually between 8 to 13 years of age in girls and 10 to 15 years in boys.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I remember whenever I was coaching, that's exactly the age range, and some of them ended up being as tall as me, and that's scary when you're looking at a 5th or 6th grader that's as big as you. You're like, what the heck is going on?
Welcome to my world.
I know.
They're all bigger than me. I'm like, what happened? These kids are way huge now. It's funny. Yeah. Well, so did you ever have growing pains?
I still get growing pains.
No, not in your tummy.
No, well, not my tummy, but like in my knees and my elbows and things. And I don't know, it might just be arthritis at this point.
But you're not, yeah, right. You're not 30 yet. So don't guys grow till they're like 32 or something?
I mean, studies suggest like 21-ish.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but your ears and your nose never stop growing. So
that's true. And you're not fully muscular developed until you're in your 30s.
Want to bet?
Either,
no, I'm just kidding.
So. Yeah, actually, I'll take that bet right now.
Fine, never mind.
Well, I had growing pains, which most girls don't, but I did have growing pains. I was real lanky, and I finished growing when I was in the 7th grade, so I never grew any more after that. I guess I did all my growing one spring. I don't know.
There you go.
Yeah. I stopped. I maxed out at 5'4" almost, and it was over. But I remember having growing pains, and I remember taking magnesium for growing pains. Do you remember taking anything for that?
Nah.
You just sucked it up and rubbed dirt on it.
That's pretty much it, yeah. I just went and dug holes outside.
Just dig a hole.
That's it.
What's up with boys digging holes? That's
I don't know.
Funny. Okay, well, I think that about wraps it up.
Awesome. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for sticking out. Sticking
with us this long?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that. All right, thank y'all. We hope you enjoyed our time together today. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our most current episodes.
If you have something that leaves you asking, what the health? We would love to hear from you. Go to getfitwithkimtoday.com/podcast to connect with us and submit your comments or questions.
Be sure to get your free Smoothie Recipes ebook on our site as well.
Until next time,
Stay strong.
and live well.